There's no other way to say it. I'm horny.
Your voice is like...
Do you want me to look at it?
Scared?
Welcome to my channel, and today we're going to recapping the first 4 episodes of The Last Man on Earth approximately 1 year after the virus in 2019 that has wiped out humanity. Lone survivor Phil Miller travels around the United States for any signs of human life. While on his trip around the United States, Phil posts alive and Tucson messages on city and state billboards in a way of contact after finding no survivors. Phil decides to return to his hometown of Tucson in his small apartment, but immediately takes his RV and breaks into a residential community with mansions. After settling into his new home, Phil enjoys himself in a parking lot by bowling with fish tanks, lamps, and even crashing cars into each other. But after 5 months, Phil's fun begins to slow. SL decreased due to his loneliness without a companion or anyone to talk to. He begins to talk to sports balls with faces on them. After celebrating his birthday alone, Phil heads to a shop with a mannequin inside glass. He flirts with her, but when the mannequin falls over, Phil realizes he's slowly becoming insane and decides to commit suicide after painting a red target to crash his truck into Phil parts ways with his sports balls and planet Earth entering his truck. Phil takes a chug of alcohol and begins his plan, but right before crashing, Phil sees a smoke signal nearby and immediately applies the brakes and gets out. Rushing over to the campsite, he sees the undergarments of a woman. He begins to rub them on his face, but then passes out. The delusional Phil fantasies a pretty woman, but in reality Phil wakes up to see a different woman attempting CPR on him. Misunderstandings cause the woman to take out her gun on Phil, but after explaining poorly, Phil gets her to calm down, and she reveals her name to be Carol Pilbazian. Phil and Carol travel to Phil's house after meeting, where she finds his house is filled with pornography and loads of garbage. While driving her back to the campsite, Phil finds her personality to be annoying. The next day, Phil wakes up in the morning to find Carol cleaning his house, which angers him even more. Carol pleads that she needs to work on fresh food, and he needs to clean his house, which leads them to head to a hardware store. But as soon as he gets there, Phil parks in a handicapped parking spot, much to Carol's dismay, but more arguing leads to Phil ramming the truck through the store entrance the following day. Carol moves in next door to Phil to his annoyance, but Phil soon starts a fight with her, admitting that she thinks he is a slob here. Carol also plants a tomato garden but is having trouble maintaining it, as there is no water source, with Phil later stealing her tomatoes at night, and her injuries and failed attempts to fix the water problem. She decides to give up, feeling guilty and knowing the right thing to do. Phil attempts to fix the water problem himself by using duct tape and his Jenga tower to fix it, along with researching water systems. He eventually fixes it and scores an invitation to Carol's for dinner. Over dinner, they discuss about the future of the human race. Phil agrees to repopulate with Carol, but Carol pleads that she wants to be married to avoid having bastard children, although it angers him. Phil immediately proposes to Carol. Phil is fantasizing the wedding with Carol, which is filled with people, which shocks him and wakes him up. As the day goes on, Carol spends the day preparing for the wedding, while Phil spends the day having a bachelor party with himself. Later that day, Carol contacts Phil to come to the church. He then arrives there and finds the hard work that Carol put into the wedding. But Carol is annoyed that he didn't get the rings, the one thing that he was supposed to do, out of anger and disappointment. Carol ditches Phil. Phil goes to her house and breaks down her door to find a whole after-party set out. He later finds her at Craftsworks and decides to apologize to her. Phil then heads to a jeweler with Carol for the rings and gives her a hammer as a wedding gift to choose the ring she wants. They then return to the church and get married and enjoy themselves with sex at the end of the night. The next day, the newlywed couple enjoy themselves with a day of fun. Phil admits to Carol that the marriage is tolerable, but he soon crashes his truck into a limousine, leading a blonde woman to exit her vehicle to see Phil and Carol, when Phil's truck ends up exploding from the crash. Phil, Carol, and newcomer Melissa head off elsewhere in her limousine. He attempts to impress her by shaving his beard as well as getting her a new car. His attempts to impress her begin to annoy Carol, who has yet to fix her door. Later that night, while Carol makes dinner, Melissa and Phil talk to each other. Melissa explains to Phil that she has been horny for 2 years, which excites Phil, but Melissa pleads that she can't.